Hello, accounting scholars, and welcome to the last week of college accounting. Hey, hope you had a great Memorial Day. Hey, we're going to rock and roll here and move through chapter 14 relatively quickly. There are a couple things that we need to cover, so get your notes ready and let's start to rock and roll. Okay, we're talking about debt financing, and debt financing is basically just that, how to grow your business by using various debt instruments. And there are three basic types of notes. The first type is called a periodic payment note, and this is typically a installment note, where you make periodic payments, and if you are the borrower, when you do take this loan or initiate this note, you receive the face value of the particular note or amount that you borrowed, and then, as you would expect, just like a car loan, you make periodic payments on the principal, the total amount you borrowed, and interest. And of course, to figure out how much you're going to be paying, we're going to use our present value formulas. And in this particular case, when you take out an installment note, you would have a present value, which is the amount borrowed or the principal. You'd have the future value, which is 0, because you're basically retiring that note as you make payments over time. You have the annual interest rate, the number of payments per year, and then the total number of payments, and then the ANN, the annuity amount, is actually the actual amount of payment. So let's take an example. Let's say your company needs to borrow $20,000. You sign the note for a 2-year period, and you agree to make monthly payments at 12%. What's the amount of each payment? Well, let's pause the video here, if you will, and let's figure out what the answer is. So you basically have these particular knowns: present value, future value, etc. Okay, pause the video, fill in these particular knowns, and then calculate the amount of the payment. Okay, you should have come up with something that looks like this in terms of substituting the values in, and an answer of $941.47. So please go back and make sure you got this all correct, because you will definitely see this on future quizzes and the final. All right, moving on. The second type of note is the lump sum payment note. Now, the lump sum payment note is non-interest bearing. And so the borrower receives an amount less than the face value of the note. So let's say you borrowed $100,000. Instead of getting $100,000, you would receive something like $75,000, because it's a non-interest bearing note. So you receive less than the face value of the note, but you do repay the face value of the note at some point in time. So then the question is, what kind of rates and thus are you paying? Well, let's do an example here. Your company needs to borrow $20,000. It signs a lump sum payment note for 2 years with a market interest rate of 12% compounded quarterly. What is the amount required the company to repay in 2 years? So basically, you would be paying off a one-time payment in 2 years. Well, you basically have the same types of variables that you're dealing with: the present value, the annuity amount, the rate. So again, here, let's stop the video, take a shot at trying to solve this, and see how you do. Okay, so you would have substituted present value, annuity amount, the rate, and all the other various variables, and you should have come up with $25,335.40. Again, make sure you understand how this calculation is done. Review it and be very familiar with this particular problem and calculations to solve it. Okay, the next note that we will talk about is the periodic and the lump sum payment note. Now, this is a combo note, as you might expect. The borrower actually makes two promises: one, to repay the face amount of the note at some point in the future, and two, to pay interest based on the face amount of the note and the face rate of interest periodically throughout the life of the note. So this particular note you just need to be familiar with, and make sure that you understand the various types of notes again. Okay, moving on to the most common sources of debt financing. There are essentially two types of debt financing. One is private financing, and that is borrowing from financial institutions and or leasing. Typically most loans are made through financial institutions, and most leases are financed through various financial entities. And then the other one is bond financing or public financing, and this has to do with issuing bonds. Simply put, a bond is a note that is the public is allowed to buy. It's essentially a debt obligation. Now, you might ask, what type of common types of bonds are there? And there are a variety, and make sure you get these in your notes. There are registered bonds, there are callable bonds, there are convertible bonds, serial bonds, secured bonds, and subordinated bonds. So let's take a brief definition of each of these. A registered bond is a bond that is normally numbered and payable in the name of the bondholder. So you, as a registered bondholder, would actually have your name on and number for a particular bond. The second is a callable bond. A company can buy back the bond at a predetermined price. So this is a situation where if the company is prepared to pay the bond off, they can do so when they like. The third type is what is called a convertible bond. The bondholder can actually convert the bond to stocks, and the amount of stocks or equity securities are predetermined. So the bondholder has that option. That's a nice option. Then there is a characteristic called a serial bond, and what this means is portions of the bond issues, meaning when the bonds are issued, they come due at different dates. This can stagger the amount of debt that is callable, that is due at various points in time. A secured bond, a term you're very familiar with, means that some portion of the company's assets served as collateral. So let's say you take out you issue a bond, you might use one of your buildings as collateral for that bond. And then last but not least are subordinated, and these are what are called unsecured bonds. And unsecured bonds have repayment rights that are ranked after other debt instruments. So you in the worst case scenario, let's say you have a bunch of bonds out there. If you have, let's say, some secured bonds, these particular bonds would be, in terms of payment, would be ranked under those particular bonds. All right, guys, that takes care of the chapter. Make sure you have good notes and put those in your note-taking folder. Have a great night.